Gloating is a turn-off. It alienates more than it endears. But sometimes, to gloat is also to prove a point. It's to highlight how you were right when the know-alls, who think they know everything but don't, have been consistently wrong. And throughout COVID, there's been a litany of it. There has been an insistence by state and federal governments to rely on the advice of bureaucrats over science. It's been a strategy that has failed government miserably and cost us Australians dearly. It has cost lives, ruined businesses, destroyed economies and confidence, and the list goes on and on and on. The expectations should be, especially during a pandemic, that policy making is based on science, not inexperienced bureaucrats with little experience advising politicians around how to safeguard Australians. There are far better equipped people renowned globally in their scientific world for their medical expertise than political operatives that have been advising on decisions instrumental in hurting Australia. Some will argue about Brett Sutton, Jeanette Young, Kerry Chant or Paul Kelly, for example. Aren't they the top medical officers of their states and the country? But they aren't. They are bureaucrats paid to drive a government agenda, and they've been shown to be extremely incompetent. Now, throughout the past 2 years, here at The Informer, we above all other media have advocated for the use of rapid antigen testing as a management and containment tool above PCR testing. The Informer advocated for RATs based on the highly credible global medical and scientific expert advice. We've interviewed key medical technology experts who actually understand the subject. We've interviewed industry leaders and written multiple editorials around why RATs must be adopted. We've also extended invitations to the powerful pathology groups, some of Australia's perceived medical experts and politicians, for interviews to explain why PCR testing was left to be the only tool used. Those interview requests were denied. It spoke more about their position than the strength of their narrative, and the application behind the stories being peddled about rats that were being consistently run. PCR testing for pandemics should never have been considered the gold standard, because a 48-hour turnaround time for test results simply doesn't work. So how is it then that state and federal governments, along with the media, got it so wrong? How is it they allowed themselves to be conned by pathology groups believing rats had no role to play in safeguarding Australians, reopening the country, or helping move forward where lockdowns were a trigger option to COVID outbreaks? And how is it Australia, as a nation, along with its highly paid bureaucrats and advisors, medical experts, bevy of epidemiologists, refused to look to the US, UK, Germany and European countries to see how effective rats were in reopening nations, driving economies and controlling, managing and containing the spread of COVID? Was it arrogance and hubris by Australia and our experts? Was it the same old idiom of false belief that as Australians we somehow know better than the rest of the world? Was it our refusal to accept our experts aren't the equal of the world standing as they would like us to believe? Also, we need to ask just how complicit were the TGA in failing to approve rat kits for use in Australia? Counterproductive to Australia's interest but beneficial to self-interest? Or were there other factors that came into play? Factors that see Australia facing a crisis of shortage of rats because of bureaucratic and government incompetence and mismanagement, and a money trail where somewhere along the way pockets have been lined to help foster a narrative that has more holes than Swiss cheese. The media has failed in its role by also buying into the pathology group's narrative of rats being unreliable. They failed to challenge the government about why they were not part of the strategic direction for control and management of COVID. And they failed because it blindly accepted that pathology groups and government were running without seeking reason or explanation. The crisis shortage Australia now faces is much about government incompetence as it is about the media's failure. Scott Morrison and Greg Hunt, along with all the state premiers, health ministers, their advisors and bureaucrats, must be held to account. The management, or more the mismanagement of COVID, the billions in profits earned by pathology groups and the ruination of Australia and their questionable COVID strategies have left Australia in a dire mess. And those who have put Australia in this mess now must face consequences at the next elections. And as for the media, they are now beginning to see that the writing is on the wall and they are finally shifting their narrative. But is it all too late after the damage and carnage that has been wreaked? Who knows? But once again, the Informer, it seems, and we don't mean to gloat, has been ahead of the pack of rats.